Other than President Obama's big event with Francois Hollande, President of France. But before we get to that, we do have some breaking news out tonight from the State Department. The State Department has just issued a brand new worldwide travel warning for Americans. Just days after the attacks in Paris and Mali both killed Americans. The State Department says the threat of terrorism continues worldwide, both from terrorist groups and from potential lone wolf attackers who might be inspired by recent events. The State Department, as of tonight, is advising travelers to, quote, avoid large crowds or crowded places. Again, this is a worldwide travel warning just put out by the State Department tonight. This is the first travel alert that we've had like this all year. The State Department says it will remain in effect until February 2016. We'll be right back. 1991, in Louisiana, the Democratic Party nominated this man to run for governor of that state. He had actually served a couple of terms already as governor in the 1970s, and then he was away, and then he served another term as governor in the 80s. But even so, with all that experience, he was not what you would call a good candidate for governor. He had the advantage of being well-known and hilarious, but he was kind of a creep. He had been the kind of governor that had to take time off from his gubernatorial duties to, you know, go on trial for a variety of criminal offenses. But he was always reliably very funny. At one point in one of his campaigns, he described his opponent as, quote, so slow, it takes him an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes. His name was Edwin Edwards. And when the Democratic Party picked him as their nominee for governor in Louisiana in 1991, they knew that it was going to be a tough one with Edwin Edwards at the top of the ticket. And it would have been a tough one that year, except for the fact that in that same year, in 1991, the Republican Party also had to pick their nominee for governor. And in 1991, in Louisiana, the Republican Party chose as their nominee for governor the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Sorry, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke. And with David Duke at the top of the ticket for the Republican Party, the Republican Party lost that one. David Duke lost badly that year to Edwin Edwards, and Edwin Edwards, true to form, went on to serve 8 years in federal prison. Fast forward, though, to this year, this weekend, in fact, and the Republican Party this year reaped the benefits of not running David Duke as their candidate for governor this year. They instead ran this guy. And in election results that were kind of a shocker for a state as red as Louisiana, this weekend turned out to be the worst loss by any Republican gubernatorial candidate in Louisiana since David Duke. Since they ran David Duke, nobody has lost as bad as David Vitter lost this weekend. David Vitter lost this weekend to Democrat John Bel Edwards by 12 points, which would be huge in any state, but is particularly huge in a red state. It is a loss so devastating that David Vitter also announced immediately that he won't even try to hold on to his U.S. Senate seat next year. He is done. Barring some bizarre Louisiana-style political comeback, it looks like David Vitter's political career is over. It only took that hooker thing 8 years to get rid of him. But David Vitter will be gone as of next year when his seat comes up for re-election. And speaking of gone, David Vitter was running to try to succeed Bobby Jindal as governor of that state. Bobby Jindal did not have the option of running for re-election. He's term limited out as governor. Governor Jindal had hoped, of course, that his next job in politics would be president of the United States, a job he was actively campaigning for until last Tuesday when Bobby Jindal quit the presidential race. And now we know. Had Bobby Jindal not quit on Tuesday, had he waited just a few more days until the end of last week to make up his mind about whether or not he was going to quit, Bobby Jindal might not have quit if he waited just a few more days. Because on Friday, 3 days after he got out of the race, he, at least what remained of the theoretical idea of his campaign, got some good news. CNN announced on Friday, ironically enough, that they would finally adopt the debate qualifying criteria that Bobby Jindal had been advocating for weeks. The Jindal campaign obviously consistently did terribly nationwide, but they were starting to do okay in Iowa. And the Jindal campaign had been arguing for weeks that it shouldn't just be national polls that qualify candidates to get into the debates. It should also be specifically early polls in Iowa and New Hampshire. CNN finally agreed to that demand last Friday, 3 days after Bobby Jindal quit. That debate announcement from CNN would have been great news for Bobby Jindal if his campaign had just lasted long enough for him to take advantage of it. That change in the debate qualifying criteria would have been really good for Bobby Jindal. It has turned out so far, though, to be very bad news for Kentucky Senator and presidential candidate Rand Paul. CNN has been pretty clear about which polls it's going to use from both the early states and national polling to qualify the Republican candidates for its next debate, both for the main stage and for the kids' table. And there's a few weeks to go before that next debate happens, a few weeks to go before CNN cuts off its consideration of qualifying polls. So things might get better for Rand Paul, but right now, if CNN were making their decision today based on the criteria that they have laid out, Rand Paul would not make the stage. Rand Paul would not make the main presidential debate stage. He would be relegated for the first time ever to the kids' table down there with Lindsey Graham. And that's because this new criteria gives special weight to a candidate standing in Iowa and New Hampshire. And it turns out Rand Paul is doing pretty terribly in both Iowa and New Hampshire. And now on top of that dire political situation for Rand Paul, federal prosecutors have just brought another criminal indictment in Iowa against two guys running the Rand Paul super PAC this year, as well as another staffer who worked for his dad's presidential campaign in 2012. These three Ron Paul and Rand Paul staffers already went on trial in Iowa this year on charges of basically covering up an Iowa caucus's bribery scheme in 2012 for Rand Paul's dad. When they went on trial already earlier this year, there was a conviction on one charge in that case. But there was a hung jury on some of the other charges. And now prosecutors have kind of surprised everybody by bringing a new round of indictments in that case against those same guys. So now the few Rand Paul supporters that there are in Iowa are going to be treated once again to the spectacle of Ron Paul and Rand Paul staffers being put back on criminal trial in Iowa again. So, you know, political news mostly stopped, or at least just spun its wheels for the last 10 days or so in the aftermath of the Paris attacks. But now in quick succession, we have had this huge upset in red state Louisiana, with a Democrat winning the governor's race there by a bigger margin than we have seen in that state since the Republicans ran David Duke as their candidate for governor in 1991. We've also seen this big change in the way the Republicans are going to qualify to get into at least the next debate. We have seen the potentially devastating consequences of that change on Rand Paul's attempted candidacy for president, as well as this further bad news for Rand Paul with his staffers getting put on trial again in Iowa. But the biggest political news, at least on the Republican side, it does continue to be at the top of the ticket, where since the Paris attacks, things have taken a very dark turn, particularly as of the last couple of days.
We're winning all over. Do I hear somebody over there? You know, you have one guy over there shouting. We have thousands of people, and you'll read about him tomorrow. They'll say, oh, the room had a picket. All right, yeah, get him the hell out of here, will you, please? Get him out of here. Throw him out. No, we had it the other day. I got criticized. We had it the other night. I had a lot of people, and one guy who was seriously obese. He complained when I mentioned that food stamps, we have a lot of people on food stamps. And the guy went crazy. And they said that wasn't politically correct. Who cares? We all have a weight problem. Yeah, you can get him out. Yeah, get him out. Get him the hell out of here. Get him out of here. Get out. Get him out of here.
He doesn't need to keep saying get him out because people aren't getting him out. He keeps saying get him out, get him out, get him out because he likes the way the crowd reacts when he says it, and so he says it more. Mr. Trump is now used to having protesters of different stripes interrupt him at his big campaign events. All the candidates are used to that at this point. Mr. Trump used to say when he would yell at protesters that they should be taken out of the room, he used to say, don't hurt him. Nobody hurt him. He used to say that when he'd say get him out of the room. He doesn't say that anymore. And in fact, in this case, a CNN reporter was close enough to see what happened when the crowd responded to this lone Black Lives Matter protester who Mr. Trump was shouting at from the podium. CNN's reporter, who was right there, says the man was ultimately pushed to the ground and hit and kicked by about a half dozen people at the Trump rally. Mr. Trump then went on the Fox News channel and said if the man had, in fact, been beaten up by his supporters at that event, maybe that was a good thing.
But I will tell you that the man that was I don't know, you say roughed up, he was so obnoxious and so loud. He was screaming. I had 10,000 people in the room yesterday, 10,000 people. And this guy started screaming by himself. And they did, I don't know, rough up. Maybe he should have been roughed up.
After that morning appearance on Fox News, Mr. Trump then tweeted this wildly inaccurate but conveniently very racist little illustration of crime statistics, which are made up to wrongly give the impression that basically it's black people who commit all the murders in the United States. This is not true information, the information on this crime stat that Donald Trump tweeted, but just in case you don't get the implications of it, or maybe you're confused because you looked up the real numbers and they don't seem, in case of confusion, conveniently there's also a pictogram. There's also the scary black guy with the gun next to the wrong statistics to create the feeling he wants you to have about this, even if your mind tells you that this can't possibly be true, because it's in fact not true. It's like the picture menu when you can't quite get out the words sausage, eggs, waffle. You just have to point. Racist feeling. But now, what might conceivably, maybe, who knows, might conceivably become an issue for Mr. Trump, or at least it may become something he will have to creatively address in his campaign, is a lurid lie that he has made up entirely about 9/11. Nobody really knows if he has made this claim before in his public life, but he appears to have made it for the first time as a presidential candidate this weekend at that raucous, raw rally that involved a protester getting beaten up in Birmingham, Alabama on Saturday.
Hey, I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering.
Jersey City, New Jersey is not him just stuttering over the name New Jersey. It's a real place. It is right across the Hudson River from Lower Manhattan. Jersey City is also not just some random place in New Jersey when you're talking about 9/11. Jersey City had a very specific role on the morning of 9/11 because not only do people in Jersey City have a completely direct and unobstructed close view of what happened at the World Trade Center, Jersey City is also a place where a lot of people commute to and from Manhattan by boat, by ferry. And what that meant specifically on the morning of September 11, 2001, is that people who were injured at the Trade Center, cops and firefighters and office workers and locals who were hurt in the collapse of the Trade Center, people who were injured were put on boats in Lower Manhattan and they were ferried straight across the Hudson River to the closest point, which was Jersey City. Jersey City got the injured that day. Their waterfront was basically an extension of Ground Zero. It was part of the crisis. It's part of the tragedy. It is really right there. And now the Republican presidential frontrunner, Donald Trump, says he has seen the footage of thousands of people in Little Jersey City that day cheering as the towers went down. He says it not only happened, he says he saw it happen. Everybody saw it happen because it was all over TV. Don't you remember? It is utterly, fantastically untrue. But he is sticking with it.
You know, you raised some eyebrows yesterday with comments you made at your latest rally. I want to show them relating to 9/11.
Hey, I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering.
You know, the police say that didn't happen, and all those rumors have been on the internet for some time. So did you misspeak yesterday?
Happen. I saw it. It was
you
on
saw
television.
that with your own eyes?
George, it
police
did
say
happen.
It didn't happen.
There were people that were cheering in the other side of New Jersey where you have large Arab populations. They were cheering as the World Trade Center came down. I know it may be not politically correct for you to talk about it, but there were people cheering as that building came down, as those buildings came down. And that tells you something. It was well covered at the time, George. Now, I know they don't like to talk about it, but it was well covered at the time.
It was not well covered at the time. There is, in fact, no record of what Mr. Trump is talking about ever. Not one instance of this being televised footage of people cheering, let alone it being well covered at the time on television. Television archives from 2001 are not like in a black hole somewhere where nobody can check them. This is the real universe where we can check these things. I mean, whatever tape he's talking about seeing could be produced if that tape existed. The reason it hasn't been produced is because that tape does not exist, because it didn't happen. Because, in fact, Jersey City was right in the middle of it on 9/11, which is the record that we do have. And there was an incredible moment today when the other leading candidate for the Republican presidential nomination right now, Ben Carson, for a time today, he backed Donald Trump up on this lie, which was like finding yourself going down a rabbit hole. You get to the bottom of the rabbit hole and, hey, look, there's another rabbit hole there. Let's go down that one, too.
Dr. Carson, were American Muslims in New Jersey cheering on 9/11 when the towers fell? Did you hear about that or see that?
Yes.
Yes. Can you expand on that?
Well, you know, there are going to be people who respond inappropriately to virtually everything. I think that was an inappropriate response. I don't know if on the basis of that you can say all Muslims are bad people. I really think that would be a stretch.
But did you see that happening, though, on 9/11?
I saw the film of it. Yes.
In New Jersey.
Yes.
Dr. Carson, just to follow up on my question of 9/11, you say you saw the film. What film are you referring to? Where did you see it?
The newsreels.
The news coverage from the time of 9/11.
Correct.
Not correct. Neither the newsreels nor the film nor the news footage exists. And we're now at a really interesting moment, because where we're at as of tonight is that Dr. Ben Carson's campaign has taken back what Ben Carson said about that today. After he made those remarks earlier today, his campaign put out a statement saying, oops, Dr. Carson didn't mean it. Dr. Carson does not stand by the statement that was reported today. He was hearing and thinking something differently at the time. He does apologize to anybody offended by that, comma, for sure. For sure. So Ben Carson's campaign took it back. Donald Trump has not taken it back. And so now the man who's standing as Republican presidential frontrunner has only been shored up and, in fact, boosted since the Paris attacks. Now he wants to stay on record, sticking with his claims that policy-wise, we might need a registry of every Muslim in the United States, and policy-wise, we definitely need surveillance of mosques. But he also factually insists that there was widespread television news coverage, which he says he saw with his own eyes, moving pictures shot from life, which showed American Muslims in Jersey City by the thousands celebrating the fall of the Twin Towers on 9/11 as it happened. Donald Trump is sticking with that utterly false claim. After his rally tonight in Columbus, Ohio, Mr. Trump spoke to NBC's Katie Tur off camera, but I do have the transcript of those remarks. I'm going to read to you from the transcript here, just so we can be totally clear. Donald Trump: there were tailgate parties. The Washington Post reported it. The liberal media didn't like what they reported, and so they kept it quiet. Katie Tur: the Washington Post said it was a number of people. Trump: they said tailgate parties. Tailgate parties are thousands. They are tremendous numbers of people. I also have had hundreds of tweets saying, you're right, Mr. Trump. I saw it myself. Thank you for saying it. We wanted to say it. Hundreds of witnesses. We are looking for other articles. Katie Tur: where did you see the video? We can't find anything in our archives. Others can't find anything in theirs. Trump: I saw video. It was on television. How would I know? You'll have to find it. I've also seen it all over the internet. I've seen it on the internet over the years. I've seen it on the internet. No, he hasn't. It did not happen. That was Donald Trump speaking with NBC News. I should say this afternoon. I said that was tonight. That conversation happened this afternoon. But what he describes there, thousands of people in Jersey City cheering for the towers falling on 9/11, that did not happen. At some level, who cares about the political impact of statements like those, right? I mean, the serious question with specific statements like that, not just your run-of-the-mill lie. The specific question now, the serious question now, is what do statements like those do to our country, regardless of what they do to any one candidate or any one campaign? Stay with us.